All right. Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah, Quitash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who have taught me this truth and who rule well in this truth. Shalom to the 144,000 and the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel that is scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Peace and mercy unto you, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. You are the true Hebrew Israelites that the Bible speaks of. You are the true chosen people of the book. All right, so let's get into some news, man. Let's get into what's going on in the world, man. All right, let's report on it so you know what's going on, what's happening in the world, man, so you're not living under a rock, man. All right, because what the Lord is doing right now, he's mustering up the hosts to battle, man. All right, the Lord is gathering all these nations right now, literally. All right, for this third world war right before our eyes. And this is what the true prophets and the true servants of the Lord have been prophesying. This is what we have been prophesying, man. And now it's finally coming to pass. You see all these things coming to pass to where we don't really have to say too much anymore, man. The prophecy is speaking for itself. It's speaking loudly, man. All right? You know, the scriptures say, at the end it shall speak and not lie. You know? And right now we're speaking very loudly, man. All right? So, you know, there's many, there's wars going on in the world right now. There's tensions between nations. There's civil wars and proxy wars and, you know. All right. So what I got here from Politico, I got an article. All right. And the title reads, Taiwan reports large scale Chinese military aircraft presence near the island. So you got military aircraft, you know, surrounding the island of Taiwan. All right. Because, you know, China wants to overtake Taiwan. All right, so it says right here, it says the Defense Ministry detected 26 Chinese military aircraft around the island Saturday. All right, it says Hong Kong. It says Taiwan saw a surge of Chinese military planes near the island. Its Defense Ministry said Sunday after a sharp drop in flights over the past 2 weeks has sparked discussions among observers. The ministry detected 26 Chinese military aircraft around the island on Saturday, with 16 of them entering its northern center and southwestern air defense identification zone. All right. 7 naval ships were spotted around the island. All right, it reported. All right, it says the increased number of aircraft came after the ministry reported a fall that left analysts scratching their heads about what China's military may be up to. All right, Taiwan didn't report any Chinese military planes that went beyond the median line and entered the zone for a week from February 27 to March 5th. All right, after 2 were detected on March 6th, the next 4 days had none. Such flights resumed in small numbers between Wednesday and Friday. All right, the drop coincided with the annual meeting of China's legislature. All right, while such flights have fallen in the past during major events and public holidays, this year's fall was more prominent than in the past. All right, that's the calm before the storm. Right? It says analysts said the meeting could not be the sole reason behind the recent drop. All right, another potential factor could be a desire to calm the waters with Washington, all right, weeks before a visit by U.S. President Donald Trump. The White House has said that Trump would travel to China from March 31st to April 2nd, all right, though Beijing has not officially confirmed that. All right, some observers also suggested The decline may be driven by a shift to a next phase in China's military training and modernization, all right, with the army appearing to be exploring a new model for joint training between its forces. All right, China has vowed to seize the island, the island of Taiwan, right? China has vowed to seize the island by force if necessary. All right, over the years, Beijing has sent warplanes and Navy vessels toward the island on a near daily basis. All right, the Lord is, amping things up, mustering up the hosts to battle, these armies to battle, setting these, creating tensions between these nations, and these tensions get higher and higher and higher. All right, Taiwan's military previously signaled that it wasn't changing its defense posture because of the fall off in Chinese warplane activity. Defense Minister Wellington Koo, all right, earlier noted that China's Navy has remained active in nearby waters even as military flights have fallen off. China and Taiwan have been governed separately since 1949, all right, when the Communist Party rose to power in Beijing following a civil war. All right, defeated nationalist party forces fled to Taiwan, all right, which later transitioned from martial law to multi-party democracy. All right, so just to report on that real quick, I got another article. I had a few other articles, but they got deleted. So this is also coming. This is another article coming from First Post. It says China resumes Taiwan overflights ahead of Trump's Beijing visit. All right, it is a warning or a warm up. All right, this is March 16th, which today is March 17th. All right, it says after a mysterious lull of nearly 2 weeks, China has resumed provocative aerial missions toward Taiwan ahead of the U.S. President Donald Trump's visit to China and an arms sale to Taiwan. The Chinese behavior has troubled officials, analysts, as they have struggled to understand if it's a warning or an olive branch. All right. So then it shows you a picture. Chinese fighter planes conduct a joint combat training exercise around Taiwan on August 7th. 2022. All right, it says after a mysterious lull of nearly 2 weeks, China has resumed provocative aerial missions toward Taiwan. All right, China on Sunday sent 26 aircraft toward Taiwan, and 16 of them entered the country's air defense identification zone. All right, the self-ruled islands defense ministry said in a statement. All right, ahead of U.S. President Donald Trump's visit to China and an arms sale to Taiwan, the Chinese behavior, halting incursions and then resuming the provocations, has troubled officials and analysts who have struggled to understand if it's a warning or a sign of potential cooperation. All right, let's continue reading and see what else they have. All right. It says China considers the self-ruling island of Taiwan as a breakaway province and is committed to its merger with the main island, all right, forcefully if required. In recent years, China has become much more aggressive and mounted frequent aerial incursions and conducted regular drills that simulate attacks on the self-ruled island. All right, you see? It says, let's read that again. It says, in recent years, China has become much more aggressive and mounted frequent aerial incursions and conducted regular drills that simulate attacks on the self-ruled island. But in a sharp break from the years-long pattern, China sent only 2 aircraft near the island in one instance between February 28th and March 9th. A sharp reduction from 86 aircraft that China moved toward Taiwan in the past year. All right. Just weeks ago, China conducted largest ever drills on December 29th through 30th, simulating blockade and subjugating Taiwan. All right, so they want to take over the island, man. Wars and rumors of wars, man. All right, officials and analysts have come up with theories about Chinese behavior. Taiwanese Defense Minister Wellington Koo told Wall Street Journal that we cannot rely on a single indicator like the absence of aircraft, noting that the continued presence of Chinese warships, even as warplanes were absent, suggests Chinese military was still around us daily. Yeah. All right, can't let your guard down. All right. It says Koo stressed that the Taiwanese military remains vigilant. All right, a ploy to push U.S. away from Taiwan. All right, that's a question. It says some analysts have said that China's reduction in aerial activity could be a ploy to condition the United States to a reduced threat environment around Taiwan and nudge it into reducing focus on Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific. All right. Others have said that China could be trying to signal its willingness to reduce provocations or aggressions in exchange of some concessions, even if short term. All right. Notably, China and the United States are currently holding trade talks and are working to formalize the trade truce announced last year. All right, Ben Lewis of Plat Tracker, which documents Chinese military activity, told Journal that given reports to the United States has delayed a major arms package to Taiwan. All right, it is a realistic possibility that there is a quid pro quo regarding creating positive conditions for a provocative dialogue, but what concerns some is that there is no explanation at all for such behavior. All right, so you see what's happening, what's going on, man. All right, let me continue. What's going on here? It says everybody has a theory, but nobody has an answer. Drew Thompson, a former Pentagon official responsible for China and Taiwan, all right, and now a senior fellow at the Singapore's S. Rajaratnam, all right, School of International Studies, told Journal. What concerns me is we don't know what it means. It's perpetual threats without communication, all right, without dialogue, without thresholds, said Thompson. All right, so you see what's happening. You know, these tensions are rising between China and Taiwan, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's also tensions between China and Japan as well. You know, but you know, for a while now, you know, China been wanting to overtake the island of Taiwan, all right, and it's going to come to pass where, you know, these two are eventually going to go to war, you know, because that's part of this. That's World War III. That's, you know, all these nations are going to be at war. You know, this is biblical prophecy, man. The Lord said He's going to gather all nations and assemble the kingdoms, man. You know, to pour upon them the fire of His jealousy in this third world war. You know, so just to report, you know that's part of the this is part of prophecy in these last days. You know, the Lord mustering up the hosts to battle. All right, you know, the Lord, you know, assembling the kingdoms. You know, gathering the nations. You know, wars and rumors of wars. This is part of all of that, man. You know, this third world war. All these this whole world is at war right now. Literally, this whole world is at war right now. All right. So, you know, just a quick report on this, man, to let you know what time we're living in, what's going on, man. All right, because now, you know, even China and Taiwan got tensions, you know. All right. So with that being said, you know, Lord willing, Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai Ratazah, this lesson is or was edifying. Call Halalyum, Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai Bahashim Rakal Quick Dodge. All right, on to the next one. Shalom.